My name is Captain Elena Park, U.S. Army Military Police, and my brother punched me in the face on my wedding day. It wasn't a stumble. It wasn't a drunk swing. It was a clean, deliberate right hook that cracked across my cheek with a sound I will never forget. One heartbeat I was holding my vows. The next I was stepping back, vision flashing white, veil slipping off my shoulder. The garden froze. Somewhere behind me a champagne flute shattered on the flagstone, and the music choked out half a beat late, as if it couldn't believe what it had just underscored. 70 people stood in place. Mouths open. Eyes ping-ponging between me and my brother Caleb Park, like they needed permission to accept what they'd seen. I tasted copper. Heat spread under my skin. My veil snagged on my heel as I corrected my balance. Muscle memory from 100 combatives drills kicking in. Feet under me, chin tucked, breathe. The dress my mother chose before she died dragged against the stone. My grandmother's gasp rang louder than the speakers. Caleb didn't sway. He didn't slur. He stared at me, cold, almost satisfied, as if he'd proved a point. My husband, Noah Hale, moved first, closing the distance, but for a long second all I could hear was the kind of silence soldiers know from after-action scenes. The blast is loud, but it's the quiet that swallows you. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I ran the internal checklist. Bleeding minimal, jaw intact, crowd static, exits left and right. And still the humiliation hit harder than the pain. I scanned faces, waiting for someone, anyone, to step in. No one did. We weren't just a bride and groom anymore. We were a crime scene with witnesses. My brother hadn't just wrecked a day meant for love and unity. He'd done it on purpose in front of everyone we know. Why would my own brother take a swing at me on the one day I should have been safest? The question rang louder than the hit itself. We grew up in a house where boots were lined heel to heel and emotions were stowed like contraband. My dad wore his uniform like a second skin. My mom polished the world so it looked perfect from the curb. Caleb thrived in that display, loud, certain, the golden sun. I learned to be background noise. When he scored the winning goal, they called him destined. When I brought home straight A's, I got a nod and a keep at it. Inside those walls, Caleb's shine turned sharp. He'd take my things, yank the blankets at 2 a.m., shoulder check me in passing just to remind me who set the rules. If I cried, he laughed. If I stayed quiet, I was weak. My parents called it sibling rivalry, and told me to toughen up, as if silence could be armor. So I adapted. Head down. Voice low. Don't complain, don't expect rescue. Survive the room, survive the day. As we got older, the gap widened into a blade. I built a life brick by brick. School, commissions, quals nobody claps for, responsibilities that stick when the cameras are gone. Caleb clung to war stories and applause. At family gatherings, he'd hold court about danger and deployments while everyone leaned in. If someone asked about my work, he'd cut across with a joke that shrank me down. Didn't know PowerPoint counted as service, he cracked once after I briefed a charity board on veteran re-entry. They laughed. I smiled like it bounced off. It didn't. I never wanted to compete with him. I just wanted room to exist without being compared. But every time I used my voice, I saw his jaw tense like I was stealing oxygen. He kept a running ledger of my stumbles and retold them as cautionary tales to fix me back in place. It wasn't about me failing him. It was about him refusing to see me as anything but competition. What started as rivalry calcified into something toxic. My strength read to him like theft. I met Noah Hale during a joint training block that felt more like penance than prep. The range dusted everything in chalk. The chow was forgettable. The schedule was designed by someone who hated sleep. Noah moved like a guy who'd carried too much weight for too long. Quiet, squared away, zero theater. We shared a folding table, then a lane, then a habit of debriefing after lights out. What went right, what we'd fix, who needed a spot tomorrow. He didn't flinch when I spoke in acronyms. He listened when I diagrammed a messy op and asked better questions than any instructor. When a recruit melted down on the line, Noah and I split the problem without a word. He handled the kid, I handled the safety, and neither of us needed credit. That's what drew me first. He wasn't threatened by competence. He recognized it. We married fast by civilian standards and slow by military ones. Enough time to meet each other's ghosts. He knew about Caleb. He'd seen that brand of brother before. The kind who thinks your success rewrites his story. We agreed on boundaries, on not feeding the drama, on building our house like a mission. Clear calms, shared load, no friendly fire. Caleb hated it. He masked it as concern, called Noah soft for not keeping me in line, rolled his eyes at my rank, belittled my unit because it wasn't his. Every promotion I earned he made smaller. Every skill I mastered he recast as paperwork. And when our wedding invitations went out, with my name, my rank, my vows to a man who treated me like an equal, Caleb's fuse finally met its match. That punch in the garden wasn't about a song he didn't like or a drink he didn't have. It was the end point of a lifetime. Me refusing to be the quiet sister, the compliant daughter, the safe mirror for his insecurities. It was control trying to reassert itself the only way it knew how, through impact. Here's what he didn't account for. I'm not 12 anymore. I'm a military police captain with a spine built by rucks, ranges, and rooms where I had to earn credibility the hard way. My instinct wasn't to wilt, it was to assess, set boundaries and act. The next move would be mine. The air was dry, the ground cracked, and tempers ran hot. Most people filled the space with noise, mistaking volume for strength. Noah was different. He moved quietly, steady in a way that made the room adjust to him without him asking. The first time I really saw him, I was bent over a map, brushing grid off grid lines while a half circle of guys argued over who sounded right. Noah stood at the edge, silent, tracking the terrain and the people. Then he stepped in and said low, "You're the only one actually looking at the map." No smile. No lecture. Just the truth placed gently on the table. I looked up and felt seen. That was his way. He never competed for space. Space bent around him. When other voices pressed and bragged, he stayed calm, and it unsettled anyone who relied on intimidation. He didn't bark, he waited. And when he finally spoke, everyone listened. It wasn't power, it was presence. One night after range work, a few of us circled a dented kettle for rationed coffee and empty stories. Noah sat a little apart, quiet, sipping from a beat-up metal cup. I walked over and handed him half a protein bar I'd forgotten in a pocket. He took it like I'd passed him something important. After a long beat he asked, "What do you miss most about peace?" "Not home. Not leave. Peace." It startled me. "Not having to look over my shoulder," I said. He nodded once. "That's a good one. No filler. No small talk." The silence that followed felt safe. Where Caleb thrived on dominance, Noah offered steadiness. Where Caleb made people smaller, Noah gave them room to breathe. In his stillness my voice mattered, not because it was loud but because it was mine. That was the first time I understood protection without conditions. Our wedding garden looked like a postcard. White lanterns in the trees, magnolia around the arch, stone paths scrubbed to a shine. Late afternoon light washed the rows of chairs. The air hummed with cameras and whispered smiles. My dress trailed behind me. My pulse raced with that bright kind of nerves you only get when you're stepping into your own beginning. Noah stood at the altar, grounded as ever, a point of reference in a moving world. For a few minutes everything felt whole. Then Caleb arrived 15 minutes late. Uniform razor-pressed. Eyes scanning like he owned the ground he walked on. But his face was flushed. The sour bite of alcohol came with him, and the garden's mood shifted on contact. He walked the aisle like it was his, and eyes followed, peeled off me, peeled off the vows about to start. The knot in my chest cinched tight. Peace was already slipping. I just lifted my vow card when Caleb stepped out from the second row, jaw locked, stride deliberate like he was marching into a fight. I didn't even have time to brace. His fist cracked across my cheek. Clean hard. Heat flashed. The world tilted. Lace snagged at my heel as I stumbled. 70 people froze. A flute shattered somewhere behind me and the music cut a beat too late. Blood salted my tongue. Shame burned hotter than pain. The bride in white with a blooming cheek. Noah moved before I could steady. He slid between us, calm as a loaded sky, voice flat enough to cut steel. "Face the wall. You just assaulted a commissioned officer." No one moved. Not even Caleb. Disbelief flickered, then panic as the words landed. In that stillness his authority collapsed without a second punch. Guests stared, some studying the ground like it might swallow them. For the first time in my life I saw my brother without the shine he demanded. Just a man, small in front of witnesses. The ceremony didn't crash so much as go quiet, pressure heavy. My cheek throbbed. My hem was torn. Eyes clung to me then flinched away. I expected anger. What came was clarity. The kind that arrives when an illusion finally breaks loud enough for everyone to hear. Caleb hadn't changed, he'd only gone public. Noah didn't crowd me with speeches about strength. He stayed close enough that I could feel his steadiness, fingers grazing mine until I took his hand. That single touch anchored me better than any apology could. Around us, people fumbled. My aunt's hands flew to her mouth. A toddler cried. A man from my father's unit coughed and looked away. A few guests stepped forward, then retreated when no one else moved. Unity evaporated. Fear of choosing sides took its place. I could have halted everything. Instead, I turned to Noah and whispered, "Do you still want to?" He didn't hesitate. Under a slightly crooked arch, we spoke vows that weren't polished, but they were true. At the reception, the crowd hovered at the edges. Some offering apologies they didn't owe, most avoiding my eyes like proximity might make them complicit. Noah stayed beside me. The photo line was short. The line for silence was long. And still we stood, married, steady, and very, very done pretending. Others slipped out early, unable to stay in a room that now carried the weight of violence. Platters cooled. Music felt hollow. Noah stayed close. He didn't try to glue the day back together, he just stayed. That night, with a cold pack on my cheek, he handed me water and sat shoulder to shoulder. We breathed in sync. My body ached. But in that stillness I understood something new. For the first time in my life, I wasn't alone in the aftermath. Healing had already begun. Silence doesn't sit still. It grows. It shields the wrong people. 4 months I lived under that day's shadow, the bruise fading from skin but not from memory. Then one by one women came forward. Colleagues, junior sailors, women who'd worked under Caleb's command. Different details, same pattern. Charm in public, control in private. Careers threatened. Confidence chipped until they doubted their own worth. They thought no one would believe them. I listened to the first testimony tremble across my kitchen table, opened a drawer and slid over copies of the incident report from my wedding. "You're not alone," I said. Her shoulders dropped. The crack in the silence widened. More voices followed. Promotion, postponed. Then Caleb went under formal review. The man who once commanded rooms now faced the collapse of everything he'd built. His power had lived in silence. Silence was gone. What I felt wasn't revenge. It was truth finally breathing. When Noah and I left the service, it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like stepping out of armor we'd worn too long. We moved to a quiet town where mornings smelled like pine and nights were just crickets and our own breathing. Noah built a small shed out back and worked with his hands. I joined a local veterans center, not as a therapist but as a steady listener. I knew how to sit with people who carried too much without rushing their pain away. Healing wasn't erasing the past, it was learning to live with it without fear. 2 years later we returned to the garden. The magnolias still bloomed. The stone path curved the same. No chairs. No crowd. Just us. I wore a simple dress, no makeup. Under that same arch, now slightly crooked, we spoke quiet vows again. Not for an audience. For ourselves. We walked the fence line, palms brushing rough wood. No ghosts. No flinch. I looked at Noah, steady as always, and felt peace settle where panic used to live. I smiled, drew a long breath, and finally said the words I'd been waiting years to speak. This time I am free.